3 weeks till the NFL draft, and let's hear from Pro Football Focus. These guys are all in on draft coverage. Trevor Sikkema is the NFL draft analyst for Pro Football Focus, our good friend. Good to see you again, Trevor. Thanks for the time. So give us your schedule, your content, what's coming out 3 weeks to the NFL draft.
Man, we are pedal to the metal, final stretch here with the PFF NFL Draft Guide. We've already got 200 players out there. If you got a PFF subscription, you can go download that anywhere and you can check that out. And we'll be pushing it over 250 prospects by the time draft weekend rolls around. So we'll have all the good stuff, the scouting analysis, the strength and weaknesses, the player fits, the comps, all that good stuff. So it's hopefully a good resource for people, not just to know the prospects before draft night, but also after your team may have drafted a player and you say, hey, I don't really know a ton about him. You can go back to the PFF Draft Guide, learn about all that good stuff and how they're going to fit with the team. So that's what we got going on. Final push here for the last 30 weeks. So it's exciting times.
You guys are nonstop. There's no doubt about it. Pro Football Focus, the place to be. We'll get to more of the draft stuff coming up in a moment, but your reaction to the Jags free agency haul. About 9 free agents came in or were traded over or were signed right before the start of the league year. 9 veteran players coming in to this football team, including Mitch Morse, the center, Gabe Davis, the wide receiver, Eric Armstead, defensive end. Those are kind of the big 3 names. Did they do enough in free agency, and how impactful should these guys be quickly?
Yeah, I really like the 2 trench additions. Like, I think the Mitch Morse addition is going to be great for them. I think they needed to kind of fortify their consistency in the trenches, whether it's kind of at the guard spots or at center. Obviously, Morse kind of playing that centerpiece for the offensive line. I think that's going to help out all 5 spots. I really do. So I think just his veteran presence, what he has meant for Buffalo over the last couple of seasons, them kind of hating to see him go, I think tells you how good he can be in Jacksonville. So I think that I like that addition a lot. I like Eric Armstead just because he's so unique, right? He's such a unique, he's a uniquely built player with his size and strength combination with the Jags playing more of that odd front stuff. You get a little bit more creative with where you can align this guy because his length can be such an issue for you. Sometimes when you get into these odd front defensive linemen, you pigeonhole them a little bit. Okay, well, they're just defensive ends. They're just nose tackles, one or the other. But when you get those players that can be really versatile for you, and love what Roy Robertson Harris was able to do for him last year, and you just get another versatile player in there along that defensive line, helps out those edge rushers, helps out Josh Allen, Trayvon Walker, all those guys. I just love the presence that he brings. And obviously, coming over from a program like the San Francisco 49ers that have had a ton of success, he can help set the bar, right? Exactly, of how we become this consistent playoff team, have this playoff attitude and mindset, which Jacksonville feels like they're right there. So adding players that have that veteran playoff experience, I think it's going to be huge for him. I like the Gabe Davis signing. Obviously didn't have his best year last year, but I think he's a good vertical threat for you. I think that they were hoping to kind of pair him and the rest of the wide receiver room with Calvin Ridley, but Ridley now gone. You look at the draft and those first or second round, and you wonder if they're really going to hit that position hard because it's a nice addition for them. But I still think that they could use some extra juice in that area. And then, I think you look at the secondary, you're bringing in Darnell Savage, you're bringing in Ronald Darby. I think those are good veteran signings to kind of supplement those drastic needs that you had. And that's kind of what free agency is all about. Sure, you want to make the big splash with some of the players that could really be game changers for you. But more often than not, the moves that you make in free agency are simply to make sure the holes on your roster aren't so glaring, to give you that ultimate flexibility when you get in the first and second round. If there's a player who's fallen in the draft that you didn't think was going to fall, and okay, maybe he's not the most pressing need, but he'd be a great player for your franchise and your organization, gives you the freedom to go pick those guys up. And I think, bringing Savage and Darby into the fold allows you to do that with those secondary picks. So I do like what the Jags were able to do with the additions that they were able to make.
Yeah, the best available player mindset could be in play, obviously, if you can fill all those holes, which at least they think early that they might have. Trevor Sikkema with us, Pro Football Focus. So that gets us to the draft now. And, some of the changes that teams in the division have made at wide receiver. Of course, Ridley, as you mentioned, now to Tennessee. Stephon Diggs is now in Houston to add to that now potent offense. It's only becoming more so. Does that even trend more towards cornerback for the Jaguars at 17? At some point, you got to cover some of these guys.
Yeah, and you look at Indianapolis as well, right? I like the addition of Josh Downs in the draft last year. I like Michael Pittman Jr. As people talk about them targeting a wide receiver at number 15. If they get themselves an A.D. Mitchell from Texas, a Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU, all of a sudden Boy, those are three receiving cores now that the Jags have to go up against twice a year. That is tough. I mean, that's deep, that's talented, and like you said, it puts a little bit more pressure on them potentially going corner in the first round at number 17 overall. Maybe they feel aggressive enough to maybe move up and go get the top CB1 in this draft, because it feels like it's hard to believe that no corner would go before number 17. But I think any of these guys would be on the board for them to play opposite Tyson Campbell. I like Quinyon Mitchell a lot from Toledo. I think that he's probably going to be the first cornerback off the board. It's just hard to not look at what he's done over the last 2 years and feel like there was something that he left on the table, or that there was a box that was unchecked. He's got good size. He's got incredible speed. You saw him in off coverage roles over the last 2 years, elite PFF grades in coverage, which is extremely impressive. Had the most forced incompletions of any cornerback in college football over the last 2 years, a handful of interceptions as well with good ball skills. But really the only question with him was, hey, can you play him in press? Can you play him in man? Because he was a big off coverage defender at Toledo. And, I think that they did a really good job at the Senior Bowl of saying, okay, we've seen you play off coverage a lot. Now come in and what do you like in press? And they lined him in press. And what did he do? Well, he basically just shut down every receiver that he went up against. So checks all those boxes. I think he'd be a phenomenal choice for Jacksonville if they have the opportunity to take him. You have Terron Arnold from Alabama, Kool-Aid McKinstry, his teammate at Alabama as well. Could be really solid players, especially, again, in a situation where you already have Campbell, who is an ascending young cornerback and one of the best young corners in the game. I think that getting that elite outside cornerback duo is paramount to, like you said, being able to keep pace with a lot of the teams in this division. And you don't always want to make your moves based on someone else, but I do feel as though Jacksonville kind of made a lot of their moves in kind of like what they wanted to do in free agency. And so the draft you could argue that, okay, it could be a little bit more reactionary, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially if you get a really good football player on your team. So I think that, yeah, when you look at the rest of that division, having to play all those teams and those offenses at least twice a year apiece, that definitely ups the pressure to make your secondary as good as it can be.
Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus at Tampa Bay Trey on X. Well, that's one philosophy, is to defend it a little bit better. Well, the other one is to, fight fire with fire and add some more offensive weaponry for Trevor Lawrence at wide receiver. And the Jaguars historically in the early rounds have not drafted a lot of wide receivers. Only 9 all-time in the first 3 rounds have been selected by the Jaguars. Only one of those, Trevor, has made it to a second contract, and that was Marquise Lee. The last first-round draft pick for the Jags at wide receiver was Justin Blackmon in 2012. So they haven't historically fared well in this department. But if they were to go the wide receiver route, is there something there middle of the first round?
Yeah, I think there absolutely is. And the good thing about it is, Jacksonville's sitting here, they've got a second round pick, they got a third round comp pick, right? Now, I think that you could even maybe get an impact receiver in the second and third round as well. But I don't, the big question is, hey, this wide receiver class is so good, it's so deep, it's so talented. Does that deter you from taking one in the first round because you think you can get one a little bit later? I think it's an interesting conversation for teams to have, but I would tell you that I wouldn't really let the thought of that get in the way of me taking a guy who I think could be a wide receiver 1 on my team. And I think that when you look at an A.D. Mitchell from Texas, a Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU, those are 2 of the wide receivers that I think could be in that sweet spot of still available but really high impact players for them at number 17 if they don't move. It's tempting. It really is. I think that both of those guys, their games aren't perfect yet. It's not as well-rounded as it could be for either of them. But hey, I mean, you just look at the athletic baseline for both of these guys. I mean, A.D. Mitchell, relative athletic score, one of the best wide receivers that we've seen over the last, 5-6 years. You look at Brian Thomas Jr., okay, primarily a vertical threat type of guy, but while he is hopefully rounding out what he could be as an all-around receiver, what he does now as that vertical guy is pretty dang unstoppable. And we saw that in the SEC at LSU this past year. Almost 210 pounds, runs a 4.33 40-yard dash. And it was funny. I was looking over some Jaden Daniels film the other day. I was looking at how he was as a quarterback when it came to throws on the run and scrambling. So I was looking at a handful of those plays, and there's just one throw where he just absolutely fits it straight into the bucket, right in the breadbasket for Brian Thomas Jr. He's got about 40, 45 yards before he gets to the end zone. He puts his foot in the ground and he accelerates, and you go, whoa, okay, there it is. There's the 4.33. We see it. That's difference-making level speed. even at the NFL level. So you can't help but think about, all right, if you're picturing that guy in Jags colors in a Jags jersey, what it could be with Trevor Lawrence, looking deep for him and connecting with him in a vertical threat for this offense. So those are the two guys that consistently go to. If they're going to stick in the middle of the first round, you're hoping that one of Brian Thomas Jr. or A.B. Mitchell from Texas is going to be there for you. And they also, because of their athleticism, feel like Trent Baalke types. So I feel like they're going to both be on the Jags radar as well.
Trevor Sikkema with us, Pro Football Focus. All right, final thoughts about the big guys. O-line interior, D-line interior. We know the edges on defense are pretty much set here, obviously, with Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker. And they've got some pieces on the offensive line, some more veteran pieces, and a rookie right tackle. So where are you with some of the big guys and some of the value you might be able to get in the early rounds on the interior of both lines?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at these positions, I'll say like the interior parts of both trenches, and let's say you take a first round mentality towards it. There are three players where I think the Jags could convince themselves these would be good moves. Jerzon Newton, the defensive tackle from Illinois, I think he's one of the best players in this class. I think he's getting slept on a little bit. You see him at the back end of first round mock drafts. I don't really understand it, man. I've got him as a top 10 player in this class. He's graded so well for us over the last 2 years, one of the most productive players in college football. He's so difficult to block. And even if you do block him, it's so difficult to stay locked on. I mean, the block shedding ability from this guy, staying free, getting in the backfield, incredible. Byron Murphy, the defensive tackle from Texas, also sort of in that category, a little bit younger of a player, but he can play everything from a shade nose tackle to a 5 technique defensive end, man. He can play everywhere. He's got the athleticism to be able to do it. And then on the other side of things, I feel as though I don't think that Troy Fautanu from Washington is going to make it to him at 17, but he could be an option as a guard for him. I like Jackson Powers Johnson from Oregon as well. There's a little bit of injury concerns. This, rumors kind of have been floating around for the last month or so. Like maybe his medical checks weren't as clean as they could have been. I haven't really heard anything concrete with that, but that's something that people have been talking about maybe as a reason why he might fall down the board a little bit. But hey, once you get into, round 2, round 3, two guys that I think would be fantastic for them if they want to target this area in the early parts of the second round. Braden Fisk, the interior defensive tackle from Florida State. Boy, has he just come on strong. From Western Michigan for, I think, the past 4 or 5 years, comes to Florida State this past year. It took him a little while to kind of get it going. The first half of the season was pretty quiet for him, but that second half of the season, he was getting in the backfield, and you saw it at the Combine. He was the most athletic defensive tackle at the Combine. He showcased the same thing at the Senior Bowl. He was fantastic. And then on the other side of things, interior offensive lineman Zach Frazier. I think this is an underrated player right now in this class. Just a really good football player. He can play center for you, play center at West Virginia, but I think he's got the size to also be able to play guard. So I think that he's just one of those versatile interior offensive linemen who could be high impact players for you. You get a little bit further down, maybe third round. Okay, guys like Brandon Dorless, who I think would be really good 3-4 defensive rotational player for them as an interior defensive lineman. You start talking about guys like Mason McCormick, the guard from South Dakota State, Christian Mahogany, the guard from Boston College, these mean mauler types of dudes. They'll really boost the attitude and that sort of finisher's mentality that you want in the trenches in the middle. And so those are a handful of names that, as I think about, day 1 and day 2 for the Jags, if they're going to target one of those positions on the interior, those are some names that I like for them.
Trevor, you're always the best. We can count on you to dig deep and mine for names for the Jaguars in the middle and late rounds. We always appreciate your time, and good luck the next 3 weeks. I know you have a lot on your plate before the draft.
I appreciate it, guys. Appreciate you having me on anytime.
Give him a follow at Tampa Bay Trey on X. It's Trevor Sikkema of Pro Football Focus.